Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of our conference celebrating the UN Declaration. I'd like to welcome, as yesterday, Doug Goodfeather to do a brief invocation.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to say good day to all of you. And I see a lot of people that are wearing their traditional attire from their homeland and their way of life. One of the things I wanted to talk about before I pray is the encouragement of self-care, because the work you do and the places you travel, a lot of things that happen to us in our stressful time of work, travel, family, and things that we go through is we forget about ourselves. We forget about taking care of ourselves. And we were talking earlier how you guys come together, share stories, encourage each other. You guys are comrades. And it inspires you even more to get up and continue the work you do. I know how that feels because of the work I do and the perseverance that each person has been through, has a story. And one of the things that I always talk about is one of the longest journeys you can make in your life, the mind to the heart. And in that journey, we start to learn about ourselves. We remember our traditional stories and our ways, our songs. We remember our elderly, because for them, they teach us the reason why we fight. They teach us the language and the songs. So that is the foundation of who we are, of where we come from. Sometimes we take on their personalities. And I know some grandmas are their personalities are pretty strong. I was raised by my grandma and grandpa. And in the home, it was the grandma that stood, the matriarch of the home. And as I see people, and visited with some people yesterday, it reminded me of my aunties, like Lucy. It reminded me of that. The kindness in the eyes. So I want to encourage you to take care of yourself, to be loving to yourself. Sometimes it gets hard and frustrating, emotional. And sometimes you feel like crying, but what I was taught is it takes a warrior to cry. God gave us tears for a reason. And when people see you cry, they know you have courage and compassion. And when they see that, they know you're willing to sacrifice and give it your all. And the compassion for self is very powerful, because you're nourishing yourself with the power of prayer, of blessing, of the things that we're gifted with. As you've seen dancers dancing, they spread that good medicine to you to bestow a blessing upon you. Everything that I am and that I know comes from my elders, comes from my teachings. So I say to my elders today, forgive me for speaking in front of you because I'm a young man. But I say thank you too for carrying these ways for us to continue them on. I need you. We need you. The people need you to continue your fight for our Mother Earth, for the children still coming from the stars, for our children growing up. We need you to continue this fight for this way of life. It's very powerful. So I encourage you to continue to take care of yourself and stop sometimes and make a prayer. Touch the earth. Drink some water. Pray with your family and your children, because that gathers strength. Because one of the most powerful medicines you can ever be gifted is the love of your family. the love of your companion, because of the encouragement you give each other and the support. We all been through a lot, but God is not done with you yet. That's why we're still here today. Still got a lot of work to do, because a lot of things that we do, the perseverance our ancestors been through, the sacrifices they made, the languages that we speak that saved countless lives for them to be here today, their grandpas, their grandchildren, because of our languages and our culture, have saved lives in this country in wars. You preserve those things for our children to remember. So I want to continue, I want to encourage you. So I dedicate this prayer to you. And that your blessing, that your road is bestowed with a protection around you. And you continue on this journey. And you encourage each other as comrades. We need each other. We never leave a warrior behind. And you are warriors. Remember that. You're God's warriors. You're the people's warriors. And I know sometimes it's tiring and endless, and it feels frustrating. But we need you. So this prayer is for you to continue your journey, and that this blessing becomes a protection for your endeavor. I'm going to make an energy ball. And I'm going to turn this into a medicine, and I'm going to give it to all of you. Tonkashila, Unchila, Unchima Khana Makhasitomania Niwaka. Lila wo pila Tonka Chichia Pelo Petukile, Waka Ungahipi. Waya Leo. Wichashana wiankile taku washi chumpikie. Oya aungla kapikte. Oya toha otechike inetke yuhapike. Ichuo kap ojela he washi lu yuhapikte. And oya teke hechisia onkia pikte. Unchima ka meni wichoni ke. Hechisia. Unkiksu ya pikte. Naha we chose on we choni you ha piktelo. Tha chikina chante ki tha chahasa ke naha he. Makasi domini mani piki he ungla ka pikte. Tiwa he you ha piki nunka ungla ka piktelo tonkashila. Unshela piktelo. Ne wakayelo. Dagni he machashni yo kan lechisia hoichichelo. Daku wakayai okahepe tokashila yeloi chewayaki elohai chanupake wakakahepe eloi. Ho ye wo ye lo hai oi khate to pa ke ahe tu ai o ma ke ya ye lo che wa ke ye lo hai thoka shila O ma ki yo hai oi taku wa kai o ka he pe thoka shila ye loi che wa ki ye lo hai chanu pa ke wa kai kahe pe eloi ho ye wo ye lo hai oi Kate to pa ke ahe tu ai o ma ke ya ye loi che wa ke ye lo hai ko ka shi lai o ma ke ya yo hai o hai thong ka shi la wo pila chi che he chi se hoi chi che lo me ta ku ya se. Thank you.
Thank you for that beautiful prayer and invocation. I'd like to welcome Colorado Law Dean Jim Anaya.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Doug, again for that wonderful prayer. Yesterday in the fireside chat, so to speak, without the fire, that Carla moderated, one of the questions she asked was quite poignant to me. What was one of the best moments, and what was one of the most difficult moments? And I said that a lot of the moments had combinations of both aspects. And I started to tell you one story, but I decided not to. But driving here this morning, I said, I'm going to tell this story. So here goes. Another one of these good and bad moments. It's when I came home after my first, as we called them, missions, that is visits to a country to look at situations. And, I was reflecting with my family, my two young kids at the time, about how I'd been in Brazil, and it had been really intense, and I had this whole entourage, and the press were following me and hounding me, and I had the security folks all over that even following me into the bathroom, when I'd go, and all these kind of things, and how I was on TV, and it was so nerve-wracking, and I said how great it is to be back home. Then we were living in Tucson, and I talked about how I got off the plane, got out of the airport. There's no press, nobody, and my son, then 12 years old, looks at me, taps me on the shoulder, and says, "Don't worry, Dad, you're nobody here." so overall, that was a really good moment, I think. So we had a great day yesterday. Talking about the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, reflecting upon its adoption 10 years ago, celebrating the adoption of the Declaration as an achievement of the Indigenous rights movement that's gone for centuries and that has struggled in so many ways to ensure the survival of Indigenous peoples around the world. We touched upon its meaning in concrete settings in various places of the world, and we had a wonderful keynote address from Walter Echohawk, who reminded us that the real importance of the Declaration is how it makes a difference at home, how it makes a difference in the lives of everyday people in their everyday lives. Not what we talk about in Geneva, what we talk about in New York at the United Nations. That's important, but what is ultimately important is the extent to which the Declaration can make a difference in Indigenous people's everyday lives. And that's what we're going to focus on today, the implementation of the Declaration domestically at home. And we're going to divide up into working groups and along different themes and strategize about that, hopefully come up with some specific ideas about that. With that understanding that, again, Walter Echohawk so ably emphasized and reminded us of, that it is domestically, at home, that the Declaration ultimately will make a difference or not. And So our efforts need to be, as he reminded us, focused in the domestic arena. Carla will give more information on the working groups, right? Or Brody, Chandra, so sorry, anyway. So I'll leave it to them. But again, on behalf of the University of Colorado Law School, again, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to have you here. This enriches our community at Colorado. And again, we're happy to be doing this in partnership with the Native American Rights Fund, which is located here in Boulder. And this conference is part of the partnership we have to move forward with the implementation with the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and let me assure you, you're somebody very important to all of us. Chandra Roy Hendrickson, the Secretariat of the Permanent Forum, is going to give an introduction to the workshop agenda conceptually and talking about what we're really going to try to accomplish today in these workshops. And then I'll come back and provide you very important logistical information about how the day is going to work and where to go. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone, and I hope you had a bit of a rest, because today is the day when we're going to be pulling in all your brain power. So I hope there was a good breakfast out there with some very healthy muffins, zucchini, banana bread. So I hope you are feeling good, rested, and ready. So today, as Professor and I pointed out, we're going to be looking at how can we make this declaration much more practical, much more real to the people who are back in their communities. And if you may remember, I think it was Dean Anaya who said that, Mr. Somebody, who said that the declaration is imperfect. We all recognize that. And yet, as you know, for Indigenous peoples, many of us are sometimes criticized, but I think it's one of our strengths, that we're also extremely pragmatic. And we see what we have at the moment, and even with the declaration, although it was not perfect, at that moment in time, it was what we had. And we had this opportunity at the UN to make this declaration be adopted. I think that if we were going to go with that now, 10 years later, it would be a totally different scenario. And you heard our colleague yesterday, Professor Charters, explaining to you how the positions now are a bit more different and perhaps a bit more entrenched at the United Nations. So having said that, now is another opportunity, 10 years after the declaration. We've had wonderful, inspiring speeches, and thank you to our, there at the back, Professor Echo Hawk, for giving us an extremely illuminating speech yesterday, which was very, I mean, everybody, we didn't remember to eat. It was so interesting. And thank you very much for that. But it also helped us ground our thoughts in how we can make this declaration work in different avenues. Of course, this was in terms of a lot of the litigation, the courts, but there are also other courts that you have to think of, the courts that are at home, not just the tribunals and the courts, but even your communities. They also hold you accountable. And this is where we would like you to place yourselves in for today. Yesterday we had the discussions at the UN and what happens, but today we would like you, and we'd very much like to count on your help to make us ground this in reality. What is the reality back home? How do you deal with these issues? How do you, when you go back and somebody from your community comes and tells you, you've been going to all these big international meetings and you've been going to all these events and seminars and you've obviously been giving this a lot of reflection. How are you going to help me when I am losing my lands? How are you going to help me when my children grow up without knowing their own language? And that is how we would like you to think about it. So what we have done, and I do apologize in advance because we did not have your free, prior, and informed consent. But by the very fact that you are here, we're counting on that willingness, that flexibility, that openness, because we also think that all of you are incredibly experienced, knowledgeable, you know the issue very much, you also know where you want to go, you know what you want to see in 10 years from now. And that is why we're actually counting on your support and your understanding that we have very arbitrarily, in some cases, placed people in different workshops. And the reason for that is we wanted to make sure that it was balanced. And because we have quite a lot of participants, we have put it into 6, so that everybody has an opportunity to contribute and to put forward their views, their contributions, but also on what they want to see as we move forward. So there are 6 working groups. Some of the themes, of course, are overlapping. There are lots of similarities, and many of the issues discussed will perhaps also be replicated in other workshops as well. So we're going to start now with the workshops, and if you have your agendas in front of you, you will see that if you look at this do all of you have this? It's beautifully printed out, and you also have the locations. And what we have is 6 working groups. And the people who are in the 6 working groups, you stay there. So you have first one theme to discuss, which is mapping what worked. Yesterday we heard a lot of good examples, but there are many others that we didn't hear about, that many of you have worked on, and we'd like you to come forth and share that during this session of mapping what worked, what are the good practices. At the UN, previously we used to say best practices, but we realized that nothing is as best as it could be, and there's always room for improvement. So we've gone now for good practices. But I remember also going to a meeting, and one of the participants, I think it was one of our brothers from the Gunayala, who said, you know what I have learned the most from? It's not the good practices. What I have learned the most from is when we failed. Because that taught us what we did wrong and what we should not do next time we embark on such a journey. So I want you to also keep that in mind. I think it's important. We learn from our mistakes. At least I hope we learn, or at least we try to learn. Of course, some mistakes are always, I for one, can never get over some of my mistakes and keep making them. Now, what is the constitutional, legal, policy, civil, but also the community level initiatives that have worked? And that's what we want to hear from you, because it's wonderful that we have so many community representatives here, and it'll be great to see how that has worked in your own communities, given the constraints and confines within which you work. After that, we'll have lunch, and it's going to be in the same place as yesterday. Then we go at 1 o'clock. You have 1 hour for lunch. And so basically, we're going to be calling on the moderators, facilitators of each of the working groups to make sure that you keep on time, because we would like you to go then to the next one. Transfer of good practices. What has worked in one community? If something that has worked in Lucy's community, will that be practical and workable in Vicky's? Or will that also be workable in, let's say, here in Boulder, Colorado? Is that practical in Nepal? So we would like you to see what can be done and replicated in other countries. And of course, what are the factors that will help you translate that into another context? And for that, for instance, if you have a specific community structure in one community, in one country, with one set of indigenous peoples, that may not necessarily be applicable in the next one, but it can be modified or tweaked a little bit so it is applicable. We then have a little break. And I believe that, it's up to the working groups to regulate how they're going to do their breaks, but coffee will be served. And then we have the more important one, strategies to move forward. And this is where I would like you to have this quite daunting challenge of being ambitious and visionary, yet pragmatic. And that is what Indigenous peoples actually are very good at, or at least we like to think we are good at. So this is how we would like to challenge you. Can you come forward with aspects or strategies that will make the UN Declaration perfectly applied and applicable and implemented in every country and every community around the world where there are Indigenous peoples? There are about 70 to 90 countries where they live. And that is what we'd like to challenge you with. We want you to look at this as an opportunity for you to make your voice heard, your vision, put it into words, and we will then call on my colleague has a wonderful task of bringing together all these 6 working groups. We'd like to ask for presenters from all of the 6 rapporteurs. Please take notes. And Brody will then have to do that, have the presentations and all done in about 45 minutes. At least that's what we have on the agenda. But what we are also thinking of with Carol, and Carol is going to explain a little bit later, that we want to take what has been done and put it together in some kind of a compilation so that we have some kind of a document that we can look back on 10 years, 5 years from now to say this is what we said would be one of the ways we could move forward. Whether it has worked or not will also very much depend on you because you have to make it work. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Carola. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chandra, for that. So I'm here to give basic logistical information about the workshops. The workshops were conceptualized really by the UN Permanent Forum and the Secretariat's office, and I'd like to acknowledge them for putting together this, I think, really visionary way of handling day 2 of this conference. So the plan is to have these 6 workshops take place in different places in the law school. And in your name tag, there should be a yellow ticket that will indicate your workshop assignment. And as Chandra said, it would be very helpful if you adhered to that workshop assignment so that we don't end up with a lopsided scenario in the workshops. We will have a recorder in each room, a student or other staff member of the university taking notes because, as Chandra mentioned, we'd like to utilize today as a resource for Indigenous peoples going forward, and we're working to develop what type of tool that will be. But we all felt it would be a shame to have all of this expertise in one place and not really take advantage of it as a resource for Indigenous peoples. To make Brody's life a bit easier, since he'll have about 15 minutes to figure out how he's going to facilitate the end plenary session, we have put easels with markers in each room so that people in the rooms can take notes, and each group will have to select a recorder to be able to communicate findings back to Brody before the end of the day. So that will be a group reporting that will happen at the plenary session. And then we have breaks and snacks in Betcher Hall, where everything was yesterday. And lunch will be in the cafe. There's a snack, I believe, at 3:30 before the plenary session. So we're taking seriously both Mr. Goodfeather and Chandra's impetus for self-care. And lunch will be in the cafe on the 2nd floor, same place as yesterday, but you don't need a ticket. Just pick up a box lunch, sit wherever you'd like, use the time for conversation and the like. So with that, we'll break into the workshops. If anybody doesn't have a workshop assignment for some reason, if you left your name tag at the hotel, stop by the registration desk and they'll be able to direct you. And there's signs throughout the law school so that nobody gets lost. So with that, have a great day, go forth, and we look forward to going over the findings.